Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Sri Krishnamurthy from Quant University, and this is the Quant University guest lecture series. The last few months, as you know, we have been having multiple sessions on the SR26-2's influence and what does it mean for professionals in the model risk field. And also we have been inviting experts, Agos, Rafiq, Jacob Kossoff, Scott Hillard. So we have had the star team in the model risk world, if you will, sharing their experiences, coming down and kind of bringing the perspective of what they have been doing within their respective organizations on adopting some of the changes in the regulations, but also big picture wise, the whole industry is in flux with AI and machine learning kind of changing the way we do business, and with new systems with influences from the Silicon Valley, agentic AI, generative AI, we've been seeing new innovations on a daily basis. So there's been this whole confluence of technologies which are coming into the enterprise. But as a financial industry, we are trying to see how best we can incorporate all these new technologies and see if we could come up with ways in which we could standardize some of our processes, extend what we have been doing in the industry, and thinking about the platform we have had for many years on SR11.7 and what parts of it could be just extended and what parts of it need to be rethought as in a new process. So in that realm, we have put together a whole program, and we have had 10 different companies kind of go through the various pilots. So let me just share the program. It's called the Generative AI in Finance for Model Risk Professionals, and I'll share the link in the comments window. And we have had many companies who are kind of in the same boat, and we have had professionals from these firms kind of join us, and we are running the second cohort. And we got a lot of questions about, well, it's difficult for us to attend these sessions live. So we have started a new session, which is going to be completely online and on demand to train model risk professionals on the various facets of generative AI. It's a multiple module course, and it's online and on demand. And that cohort is going to start on August the 12th. And you will have the benefit of taking the course whenever you want. But in addition to that, we are going to have a series of guest lectures throughout the year. So you will be part of the community so that you can learn from the experts. And in addition to that, we are going to be hosting office hours so that you can bring in all the professionals, like-minded professionals, in an intimate setting wherein you can discuss the various issues you've been having and also think about possible solutions. So as we kind of evolve this program over time, I would love to hear back from you on any feedback on any topics which is bothering you or concerning you within your organizations, and how we can support you with your learning needs. And the last few weeks, I've had the pleasure and the privilege of having various professionals come down and talk about the various initiatives they've been having. And this week, I'm extremely pleased to invite Rafiq Faz from Fifth Third Bank. And Rafiq and I, we have known each other for many, many years. And I'm always amazed with the way in which he kind of has this, he's so grounded, but also down to earth. So whenever I interact with him, he doesn't show that he knows everything, but he just kind of, poses as though, he's kind of in a listening mode. But I am always in a listening mode whenever he speaks or whenever he shares materials, because he's put in so much thought. And not only is he sitting in a lab kind of innovating these concepts, but he has to operationalize it. And he has an amazing team of professionals. In fact, I met some of his colleagues at the forum we had on agentic AI in Boston, and everybody was kind of saying, the Rafiq is a leader, so he brings in these principles, but also makes sure that it's operationalizable. So with that, I would love to kind of bring Rafiq to the session, and he has this amazing slide deck and presentation he has put together specifically for us. Rafiq has a PhD, and he has kind of built systems. He has managed the model risk profession for many, many years. and he also leads this practice within Fifth Third Bank. And I was just sharing notes, another friend and colleague of mine who lives in the same town. So he joined as the head of fintech, Dan Alfred. So I just made that introduction to you, Rafiq. So I'm looking forward to Fifth Third being the rocket ship and also leading the way in various fintech innovations. With that, I'll hand over the stage to you, Rafiq. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Shri for the invitation. It's a privilege and an honor to be here with you and the team on this call. And today, what I'd like to share is my practical perspective on how we in ModelRest govern the AI-enabled decision systems. So before I get started, there's a disclaimer, and again, I want to set expectation that, and I want to be clear that I'm not talking about a new policy or proposed standards. These are simply my thoughts and my team thoughts on how we, as model risk practitioners, we've been through the bleeding, like Shri was saying, from SR 11.7, 2009, 10 crisis all the way till today when it comes to SR 26.2. We might think about governing the agentic AI using the same principles we already know. I mean, these are the principles that stood ground in every exogenous impact that happened to models, but we need to think a little bit outside the box. And again, there is still a lot of gray area in this space, and rightfully so. It took us some time when we went from traditional model to machine learning model. I used to call it a black box. How are you going to explain complex models? And now we're into agentic system. And my goal today is to simply to contribute to that discussion on the gray area. How do you govern this agentic system? And in my discussion with you today, I'm going to use some examples. These are illustrative examples. And the purpose here and the major intention is only to make the discussion more spicy and concrete, that you can relate to the example. And that's where I'm going to start. So, Becca, could you move to the next slide where you have the yes, thank you very much. So here, I mean, if this is going to happen to everybody in any organization, let's not be theoretical and talk in abstract. And I want to use this example. Just imagine the business comes to you with an AI commercial lending assistant. So what does this AI commercial lending assistance do? It reviews financial statements. It looks up underwriting policy. It brings in all these machine learning or any model, existing risk models that you have, and it drafts a credit memo. And the whole purpose is to help the underwriter or the credit analyst to make a lending decision. Again, this is not a real application at my bank, but I'm using this to make a case here. So the $1 million question, or the question is not if this is a good technology. The $1 million question is how we will govern this system. So how we, as a model risk management, given our background, how are we going to address the different components that you see in this system? You see models, you see underwriting policy, you're retrieving information. There's so many components, many agents working together. So how are you going to manage this agentic system? How are you going to address it? Becca, please move to the next slide. Okay. So here, there is basically one misconception that you see or you hear about is that, MRM is the first stop. So you remember in the past, when you build a model, all the traditional machine learning model, you build it, you give it to model rest, we validate, we lock, we put in production, and then we look at the controls and we look at how the implementation and the ongoing monitoring. In this case, it's not the case anymore. By the time we hear about it, like model rest, the business has already, they have identified the use case. They did their governance activities around that use case. They know exactly what to look for, how to govern that use case, and they have taken it to the some AI governance working group, like we do at Fifth Third, for review. And model risk management is part of that AI governance working group. So MRM is not anymore the front door. So we're there. We're sit at the end of the funnel where the discussion happened about the use case, the controls, what are the ingredients, what are the components are there, and we're sitting and learning about the review of that agentic system. So we're, as I said, we're at the end of the funnel, and our job is to answer a simple question: does this create a model risk, this agentic system? And if it does, the $1 million question: how are we going to govern this? So we start with the first thing we do, as you could see on the slide, is the business identification. So the potential model assessment form, and we do the scoping exercise. From there, we will determine if this AI system belongs with model risk management. Is it in scope or is it out of scope? And what type of oversight is needed if it's in scope. So this is the initial, at the inception, is super important to understand. Not every AI system belongs in model risk. There could be components of the AI system a part of model risk. So there's so many things that needs to be addressed prior to saying that it's in scope. So if it does, let's say it's in scope, like this one, obviously it is in scope. We move to the inventory, the tiering, the validation, the monitoring, the ongoing oversight. So if it's not in scope, it means there's still the individuals in the organization are going to be covering the component is out of scope, or the system that is out of scope. But through the AI governance working group with the appropriate domain owners, will be in charge of the agentic system if it's out of scope. And sometimes an AI system is in scope. There are components of it is not in scope for model risk, but it's out of scope for model risk, but it is in scope for other appropriate domain owners. And that keeps the responsibility very clear and avoid unnecessary governance. Everybody knows their boundaries and they know how to operate on it. So now let's assume that the business use case reaches our model risk. We're in the end of the funnel, and we agree this is in scope. So could you move to the next slide, please, Becca? Okay, the executive answer. Rather than make everyone wait until the end to understand if this is in scope, I just said it in a few minutes ago, it is in scope. So I would consider the AI in scope very easy, because it has an impact on credit decisioning. It has an impact on not credit decision, on the underwriting process. You're giving a loan. It is material. So we're not just looking at it, not because, we're not saying it's in scope because it's using a large language model. We're not saying it's in scope because it's agentic AI, but because it materially influences credit decisioning and combines, and at the same time, it's using a PD model and a pricing model with other components that will affect the business outcome. So if you look at it holistically, 100% is in scope. So for me, from a practitioner point of view, you want to look at what's the thing that we need to cover in here about this AI-enabled decision system. We don't want to just look at the PD model, the pricing model, in isolation of all the other components and the orchestration that's taking place. And the rest of this presentation will explain why we reached to this conclusion that we need to address the big elephant in the room is when we're looking at agentic system, we're looking at different components. What's in scope for us? It's very obvious. One of the components, the PD, the pricing model, the PD model. But the prompt, one of the prompts could be in scope for model risk, and there are components could be out of scope. But how we make sure that any component that's out of scope do not deteriorate what's in what we already have in scope and we validated. So let's move to the next slide so we could talk a little bit more about the agentic system that is in scope. So as you can see here, I call it a system of way that we try to digest the system and look at it from different factors. So you have, let's start with the first box. And again, what I'm trying to do here is look at the agentic system and try to understand the components of it. And it's simply to it's a structured way of thinking of how you're going to handle the agentic system. So I start with the AI capability, the first box, the box, the zero step. Then you're looking at the classification of the AI capability. What's the classification look like? And given that you're sitting in the AI governance working group, you can address that. Then you assess the risk factors, which is the second box. And you want to look at what are the risk factors associated with this agentic system. And then if you look at the three boxes, the UCC, the assessment, the scoping, I lump them together. I look at the intended use cases. And if you remember, Sri, in the past, when we talk about Gen AI, we look at the inherent risk of the Gen AI. We look at use and usages, the inherent risk, and we look at the control. It's very similar here, but we're looking at it at the system level. And that is how you understand and make a decision what's going to be in scope versus out of scope.
Yeah, I love the word system because that's the key word I've been emphasizing in the course too, because the model risk is evolving into system risk.
Yes, because in the past, the model was the unit of control. Now it's the system is the unit of control. A model is a component that contribute to the system unit of control. So we definitely cannot ignore the system and just focus on the model. And again, when we're doing this, and the whole point of doing the putting a precision standard and trying to understand what's in scope versus out of scope, we look at this. Given the SR 26.2, it's from a risk-based approach. It's some of that could be super important, but not for model risk. When you're doing the assessment, you're looking at the zero factor, the step one, the combining. You're looking at the usages and control, and you're looking at the tiering. That helps you to determine if it's in scope. So not every AI system ends up in scope for model risk, and sometimes it could happen that the entire AI system might not be in scope, but there could be a component in the system that is in scope, but it's maybe tier 4 level that requires a very light touch from model risk. Now, if you do this correctly and you do it in a consistent way, you're not cherry picking. You're picking models that is in scope that has material impact on the organization, and you are coordinating your expertise from model risk perspective with the other components that are out of scope, and how you communicate and interact with different model owners with different governance structure that you have to manage the entire AI system. So I would like to transition to the next slide, where we're going to talk a little bit more about how we're going to, when we're looking at the decomposed system, very simple exercise to determine what's in scope for us and what are the other components look like. So and again here, if you look at this, when you're decomposing the system, governance becomes very clear. So you understand what's in scope for you, what's in scope for others, and how to communicate with them. Instead of asking, is the large language model in scope? you step back and you decompose the entire system. Yes, there is a prompt in there, there is a tool in there, there's an agent retrieving information. You need to understand the whole process. And by decomposing it, it makes it very clear communication internally and externally. And then I look at every component that contribute to the business outcome. First you have the model. This is a simple one. The models like the PD and the pricing model. There are also other components that are not models, but still they influence the outcome, such as the prompt. And some of the prompts could be part of the in scope for model. It depends on the use and usages and how we determine that. The retrieval, the optical character recognition, the what do you call it, OCR, and the workflow. So if you look at the entire system and you decompose the system, you understand the risk associated with each of these components. And together they produce a lending recommendation, approve, decline. So the goal here is not to put everything. I'm not decomposing the system so I can grow the inventory. The goal here is not putting everything in the model inventory. The goal here is to understand what exists out there, who owns what, and how the pieces work together. This is super important for the ongoing implementations of the model, the change management of the model, the deterioration of any of the component. Things is now working outside. It's not in your scope, but it's deteriorating outside of your scope. Who coordinate the communication among the different federated group that in charge of the components of the system? So the model remains in the model inventory, as we all know, the PD model, the pricing model, or any other model is being used, while the AI system is recorded in the AI registry at the AI enterprise level. And the AI registry links all the components together and provide a complete view. So you're not blind to what the other components are doing, and enable decision system how to operate among the different components. So think of this way, that the model inventory tells us whether the individual model in that model inventory are performing as expected. You look at the ongoing performance, or you look at the performance of the model, the basic stuff that we do. While the AI registry help us understand whether the overall AI-enabled decision system is working as intended. Because if any of those system, or there is any conflict with the agents, anything that is happening outside, you're not blindsided. There is a communication happen, and the communication becomes a governance control. And it's super important for the continuity of the success of the agentic system. So we need both views, because a model can perform well while the overall system still produces a poor outcome. So your PD model is performing. That this is where the fingerprint pointing. So the model, I mean, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but in poor organization, you'll have a great machine learning model or a logistic regression model that predicts the probability of default, and then you have all the other components working together to do an underwriting and to approve a loan. And sometimes that agent can override a probability decision from a model. So what I call those treatment effects as you move forward, and that could deteriorate your model performance, your KS, whatever metric you have, it's going to deteriorate that, not because of the model is not performing, it's because of the treatment effects that happen through that agentic system that is introducing noise and error to the underwriting. So again, it's super important to look at it from this perspective. So Becca, could you please move to the next slide? Okay, so again, I want to emphasize an important point here. It's very easy to misunderstand, that something that is out of scope for model risk management, it doesn't mean it's out of scope for governance. So technology will continue to govern their technology component. The data team will continue to govern the data component. the security governance, cybersecurity, and the enterprise AI governance working group coordinate the overall process. So everybody has a task within that system. And MRM will be focusing on what's in scope while making sure, again, the dependencies that happen, the key dependencies that impact your model are poor, that are done correctly, governed by the right team. So if you have, you're looking at underwriting policy, and you're looking at deal structure or characteristics, or you're doing something to override, a score, that has to go through an effective challenge in a holistic way, and you have to do testing on that to make sure that your end result from the entire system is producing the right rank ordering. If you want to look at the right performance, you're detecting early delinquencies, there's no spike in early delinquencies. There are things that you could do to make sure that the model holistically with the entire AI system is working as expected, as intended. You're introducing efficiency, you're creating 99% auto decisioning without human in the loop, whatever the purpose is. But you definitely need to make sure that all the components are individually operating as expected, collectively at the cumulative level is operating as expected. And if any deterioration happen, any changes in the change management as we move forward in time, there's a clear communication. If the change management things changes to the prompt, it used to be deterministic, that just look at the underwriting process, you pull information, you're just following exactly what's given to you by the book. It's all deterministic, locked. And then all of a sudden you're changing that. It becomes not deterministic. You're allowing the prompt to create, looking at deal structure or looking at other business rules, and you're changing things that was not part of the intent to use. That can create a huge problem as we move forward. So the communication, understanding how it's been federated, and talking to each other is super important for the success and continuity of the agentic system. So Becca, if you don't mind, we could go to the next one. Okay, this is about the object is not the model. Okay, again, historically, as I said in the past, we focus on the model. Model is the unit of control. Now, the system is a unit of control. With the agentic AI, the risk often comes from the decision system created by multiple components, not by the individual model that we used to, validate, lock, and put in production. If you don't mind, let's move to the next slide. You could read all that on your own. I tried to make it very descriptive and visual, so you could see it later, but it's very straightforward. We're going to go to the system component. Okay, yes. This is another, this slide answers one of the question I hear more often. Should every component go to the model inventory? No, not every component. But again, if you look at, if for some reason we do not understand the entire system, if the PD model get validated and everything that is it's up to date, has been tested, back tested, stable, all of the above, but you are not aware of what's happening outside the system, and I'm repeating myself. So any deterioration that happened outside can impact that PD model, and can impact that PD model significantly. Because most of the time when you're putting a PD model or a pricing model, specifically a PD model, you need stability in the PD model. And if that system creates instability, not because of the data, because remember, when you build the model, the biases in, I don't want to call it bias, your treatment effect, your underwriting policy, your back-end policy, everything baked into your data. And that's the beauty of building models. If history repeats itself, it'll continue to be successful and produce the right number. If history doesn't repeat itself, then then the model is going to deteriorate. And here, when I say the history doesn't repeat yours, when the underwriting or the changes happen because of the agentic system, the treatment is going to change. So you in an area like if you're in the consumer space and you are in the near prime. So if you're in the near prime, a 700 near prime, meaning months of book at the credit bureau less than 12 years, 12 months, and your satisfactory credit rating is satisfactory trade is less than 2 or 3. Uh, uh, common book or number of satisfactory trade determine your thin file. It varies from one organization to the other. But a 700 thin file is not the same as a 700. And again, if you bake all of that into your model, and this system is using it's overriding your model and it's creating noise to the underwriting. Your model is not anymore stable. Not stable meaning you have a drop in chaos, significant drop, and you're saying, hey, I just built the model. This model was performing. It's because of the underwriting changes, and that can have a huge impact on you. Any of the treatment, it could be back end treatment, front end treatment, you need to be aware of it. Things could change as long as you understood what's happening, the different components that is going to impact your model, your PD model. So again, we can move to the next slide, Becca. No single function can cover agentic AI. I like that. So basically, what we're trying to say here again, the business has a role in the agentic system, and what the business role is, the business is making sure that the model was built, the intended use of the model is continued to be the same. They own the output of the model. They own the ongoing monitoring of the entire system. Okay, so you have the business control, your business unit. I hear somebody. Nope. Okay. So again, the enterprise AI governance, you have the AI registry. You're tracking all the changes. You understand each of the component. You're communicating. You're making sure that everything is at the component level is coordinating, is working well. You have model risk management. You have technology. So this is where the AI governance working group, the federated group, you have the subject matter expertise in model risk is not going to be better than the subject matter expertise in cybersecurity or in data and so on. So each of these, different groups have to work together, bring their subject matter expertise, their understanding, their past experiences, their try and error, what happened, what works together collectively. But the key is communicating with each other. I do my job, you do your job, but we're aware of how the system is operating. We're aware of any changes that happen in production. We're aware of any deterioration because there are risk tolerance. There are metrics that we're going to be monitoring as we put those in production, and we're talking to each other. So again, let's move to the next slide. So let's say now you're going back to the $1 million question is how do you do where do you start? Let's say you are in the AI governance working group, and basically you're sitting in the AI governance working group, and this example came in, and you're basically saying, okay, this is we're all in the room saying, hey, this is in scope. The agentic system is in scope for model risk. So you want to follow the steps that you want to follow. If you remember, step 0, step 1, step 2, 3, and 4 combined. So step 0 is you want to see is this actual this is an actual agentic system. So you want to assess the autonomy, the execution capability, the authority of that agentic system. And again, here with in this example, this assistant retrieves information, pick up a model, take the pricing model, it drafts an output, and it influences the credit analyst and the underwriting decision. So definitely, this is an agentic AI. So you start with the 0, then you go to the next step, which is the you're looking at the execution capability of the the agentic system and the authority behind it. So again, the how much of influence, as I describe it all in one, it is super important to understand all of that. So let's move to the next slide, please. So what can, I mean, here, you're looking at, you're trying to understand what's the impact of the system is going to be in step one. So in step one is, what are the risks that this system create? Okay, is the system, we just asked the $1,000,000 question: is the system influencing credit decisioning? Yes. It integrates multiple technologies with each other and affects an important business outcome. We give a loan, not give a loan. The combination of impact, capability, integration, and the authority that drives a higher level of risk, that's how you're trying to understand the agentic risk factors that is related to that. And if you go to the next slide, Becca, please. I think I want to combine this slide, and the second slide after that, please. The usages, the risk metric, and I think the third one, which is the final decision. Another slide, please. Those 3 slides, yes. So basically what I want to do here is, this is the 3 boxes. So you look at the uses, and control. You're trying to understand the inherent risk of the system. You're trying to look at the metrics, and you want to determine how high, medium, low the risk associated with that. And then in combination, I mean, there's no order in that, but in there, when you're looking at, you're looking at the use, you're looking at who uses the system, how it is used, and what controls are in place. That helps to determine the level of risk and what type of appropriate governance given the tiering. So if you determine it's a tier 1, the rigorous will be high, your governance will be more stringent. If it's a tier 2 versus tier 3, and if it's a tier 4, is out of scope in our case. But again, this is super important when you combine the use case assessment with the agentic AI assessment. You can conclude that this system has a material influence on credit decision, as we all discussed, and therefore should be in model risk scope. So you have that. You have a consistent way of doing this, because when the floodgates happen, when your organization start to use a lot of the agentic system, you want to have a system. I want to call it a consistent way of not cherry picking, but how to determine what's in scope versus out of scope. When it's in scope, what's the risk tiering associated with that? And then you look at the inherent risk. There's more detail in order to determine the risk tiering. And again, the risk tiering is super important, because in every organization, when you look at the aggregate model risk, the tier 1 model and tier 2 model has a huge impact on your aggregate model risk, on the denominator of your KRIs. I mean, there are a lot of challenges to make sure that you do the assessment on the risk tiering that is consistent, appropriate to the system, appropriate to the component level, because that component level risk tiering will be associated with other risk tiering. The PD model will be associated with other models in your inventory. But the tiering itself at the tier 1 level, from a model risk perspective, when we tier it, it has to align at the AI enterprise tiering, the registry level. It's the same tiering, the same rigorous, the same controls, the ongoing monitoring, the real-time monitoring of the system, the human in the loop that is needed. All of that is super important when we're looking at that piece. So if you don't mind, Becca, let's move to, I think the second one is the inventory, correct? Yes. So again, here, when we're doing the inventory, we're very good in inventorying our models. I mean, the PD models, CCAR, CECL, marketing models, treasury models, and so on. Again, we the implementation begins in the inventory. So if when you start to implement the model, you start the effective challenge of the model is when you start to put them in the inventory. So my recommendation is that the AI-enabled decision system becomes the system level governance. You cannot govern it at the model level. We've been discussing this for a while. The existing PD and the pricing model, again, they remain exactly where they belong in the model inventory. Nothing changes there. The AI-enabled decision system that were, the different components, the model inventory only tells you about the individual models, how they are performing, and what the expectation of it. The AI registry, when you have different components, tells us how all the pieces work together to support the enablement of the AI decision system. So the model stays in the inventory. The AI system is recorded at the AI registry. The registry links every component, the PD, the pricing, without moving the ownership. So the ownership of model risk remains with model risk. If there is a prompt or any large language model within the model risk, remains within the model risk. Without moving the ownership from the functions that we already decided, the federated function that are covering those components. But the key is the communication. The key is learning anything that's happening to the system way in advance before it's too late. So again, Becca, could you move to the next slide? Gentic, okay. I mean, it's the same story here. Can we move to the next slide, please? Because of time. I want to give the next slide, please. Okay. This is again, after you approve the system, it's super important to understand what to look for. What are the early warning? What are the risk tolerance? What are the triggers? It's kind of like your ongoing performance monitoring. You want to look at behavior drift. You want to look at the retrieval quality. You want to look at the human oversight. Who's checking what? The outcome, like you want to do back testing if possible. So this is a kind of like the monitor after the approval. So after we do our approval, it goes in the system. Every component has been covered by different federated group. Everybody's agreeing. So when I'm doing the next slide is the validation, correct? Let's move to the next slide. Okay, next one, please. Okay, maybe it's not in here, it's in my head. So when you're looking at the validation submission, so you have, this is going to be the model owner is going to submit this to the AI registry, to the AI governance working group. From model risk perspective, what is considered complete submission? Complete submission, the PD, I know the model owner, they know me. We've been working on the PD model for years. It's an easy task. So the PD model, the pricing model are simple, easy to have it in your inventory. But in your inventory, you need traceability of what other components can impact the model. You need that in the inventory to know about it. In your complete submission from the model owner, you need the effective challenge from compliance, the effective challenge from the data group, from cybersecurity, from the IT risk. In model risk, all you need to do is the assurance that the individual federated group have looked at different component as part of the complete submission package and understand that the expectation after implementation, there is always communication on, we communicate to them on the ongoing performance monitoring of the model risk in scope component, as well the prompt, the retrieval, the human in the loop on, there could be a human in the loop kind of like component that is needed. They need to communicate to each other. They need to let us know if there is any deterioration. And when the business unit is presenting, ongoing performance monitoring or presenting anything, all of that component, every little detail has to be understood by the business unit, understood by the business is the mall owner here, and any of the components that is deteriorating ahead of time, a flag will go to model risk. Model risk will do the assessment and make sure that if that deterioration is going to impact the model, we need to preemptively do something, work with the model owner, and address maybe it requires changes to the model to address those changes that's happening outside the model. So again, I'll stop here. I know we have like 10 minutes to see if there is any questions. There's more. You'll see more detail in the PowerPoint. Shri, back to you.
Thank you so much, Rafiq. That was a lot of material, and I'm kind of, all eyes and trying to understand all the things you shared. I think there were a couple of questions about the slide share. So tomorrow you will get an email, and I'll be uploading both the video and also the slides into QScale Bridge, and you will be able to access all the materials. So this was fascinating. Thanks so much, and contextualizing it, Rafiq, because many of these concepts in isolation seems very, what do you call, systems engineering oriented, right? To kind of, think about like, okay, so you got to do it, but how do we do it is the important question, which is what you kind of, shared on. Now, there are a couple of questions which I will bring up as we speak, but I had one question which I just kind of bothering me, and going back to my childhood, we used to call it the Indian kitchen problem. Okay. So the Indian kitchen problem is whenever, Indians, as we know, we cook a lot, we eat a lot, we have a lot of spices, and
blame each other for being too spicy, correct?
Exactly. But the thing is, like, we have big meals, a lot of different varieties. When we get into the kitchen, everybody wants to cook. Everybody wants to do something. Now, the question is, how do we assign responsibilities? And then secondly, how do we sequence them? Right. So I'm kind of bringing that parallel to the agentic side of things, because
that's a very good question. That's
in an organization, there are everybody who has like different roles and everybody wants to do something. Now, how do we bring them all together communication wise? And secondly, how do we sequence them?
So sometimes the sequence happening, I mean, if you remember when I started and said in the traditional model, you submit the model to us, we do the effectuation, we validate, we lock, and then we ask for the controls, then we ask for implementation. This is different. The controls, at conception, we need to understand all the details. Yes, it might not be in scope for model risk, but it's an important mission from the model owner or the business unit, whoever is building that agentic system, is to we need to be part of the cooking, and again, part of the being in the kitchen. It's super important because there are the skill set. Model risk have we have our own skill set, and there's a lot of learning that we now we're putting our team into upskilling them, not to become engineering, building systems and so on, but try to understand or sniff issues way before it happens. I don't really need to replicate the IT engineering, the coding, whatever they're doing there, but I would like my team to understand the implication of missing something. And you don't have to, you really need to understand. You need to do an effective challenge on a written report by IT or compliance team. Looking at the federated way of doing that, like look at the PD and the pricing model. It's easy to isolate the PD and the price. I could start with my team and say, okay, these are components, are in scope, and probably it's been validated, and there's no issues with it. The question is, how are they using this model, the PD model and the pricing model? This is where the challenge is we need in the submission, it has to be very prescriptive, very easy to understand how the agent is using an underwriting policy in conjunction with your PD model to come up with a decision. Is is the decision is deterministic? Can we trace the deterministic of the decision to historical? I mean, if historical, you're 700 FICO and your loan to value is 80, of course you get the loan and your pricing is going to be very marginal. I mean, very thin. You're not pricing a leg and arm for it. So if you're doing exactly what we've been doing across time, then you want to make sure that the tools that you're using, the retrieval information is all accurate. They can test for it. We need to know that from a model risk perspective. Now, when you glue everything together, we definitely want to see the system holistically, not as a component, because and I want to give you an analogy to a model, and then you have in the model, I want to call FICO. FICO is a component in the model. If FICO deteriorates, the model falls apart. I mean, FICO doesn't, luckily, but let's say you have a model embedded in a model. Think of it this way. That embedded model, if it deteriorates, it breaks down the big model. It's a major component. It's a heavy lifter. So when you look at the components, you want to understand the contribution to the risk to the PD model from model risk management perspective. There might be other components are very low risk as part of the system. So if you're asking me where I want the model owner, the other components to be focal point of my effective challenge, is how much of that component can deteriorate the model, how much of that component can have an impact on my model. So this is why when you're decomposing the system, you're rank ordering the impact of the component on the in-scope model. So that in-scope model has a major impact, let's say retrieval of information, coming up with the decisioning rules. You definitely want to make sure those components in combination, they're out of scope, but in scope together, the effective challenge is a priority than the other components. So by digesting the system, decomposing it, you can prioritize with your team what is the number one, number two, number three. It's kind of like in your model chi-square rank ordering. Chi-square with the highest, this is a major contributor to the overall riskiness of the system. And you can do that. So you look at the system and you can back test it and by deteriorating components, and you can see which of this component has a huge impact on the output and a huge component on the feeder component, correct? So you can do sensitivity testing on this, and based on that, you dictate which of these components it's the focal point of your effective challenge in your documentation. And look, you'll have internal audit, you have a regulator coming in. You don't want to be blind to the peripheral ones, the one that has no impact, because if you accumulate the risk, can add more risk to the overall residual error of your model. So again, it's kind of like the basic, like we said at the beginning. You keep your model risk hat on, and what you've done in the past, you continue to do. So you have an output, you do sensitivity testing, which of the components is going to impact your PD, your pricing. The outcome it's not immediately impacting your PD, but the ongoing monitoring of your PD get impacted by the outcome that deteriorates it and it makes it look bad after a while. And everything, it requires you to rebuild the model because why people change. If you think about the underwriting policy, the underwriting models, why every 3 to 4 years you have a new origination model? Reason is because you get a new chief risk officer or a credit risk officer changes the underwriting policy. It requires you to go back and rebuild the model. So having a system like this, you're getting efficiency, but you're creating a lot of noise if you do not make sure that those treatment effects that you're doing, you're not having a new chief risk officer or credit risk officer every time the agent. Think of the agents as the new credit risk officer. That has a huge impact on your PD model. So again, you need to link. It's super important to look at it holistically. There's ways to do it. And again, the more we go into this, we become practitioners. I think we're at the early stages. The try and error hopefully will be less, but it will help you get a better answer next time when I'm with you. But that's how I look at it from that perspective.
Absolutely. This is perfect because And I think one of the challenges, as you mentioned, the whole system decomposition problem, right? I mean, I've been having challenges, and I keep getting this question both from our participants in the classroom, but also when I consult with organizations on whose responsibility is that to do the system decomposition? Because the system builders, they built the system. Now, the question is, how do we do the decomposition? So I'll actually club a couple of questions which kind of came up. I'm kind of trying to bring in things in the interest of time. So one is, how do we decompose the system so that model risk can own the components which they can say we are going to validate these components? But the second part is, how do we look at things which are in scope and which are out of scope? Like, there could be like an auxiliary component wherein I'm just doing an API call and bringing back market information, which IT has already validated, and they're responsible if something breaks, kind of a thing. And then this notion of accountability, who's going to be responsible for the whole system to be validated versus individual components to be validated, because it's not just a sum of parts, it's also like
You're
software,
spot
right?
on.
It's
Spot
not.
on. That's why the AI registry, which
Mm,
is the kind of like the heart of the system that coordinate between the federated group, any early warning. But before you go there, as I
mm,
said, you look at the in scope, you in advance know which of these components, because as I said, when the mall owner is going to send to you, I don't want to call them the system owner, the
mhm,
business unit, they have to send the entire the map,
mhm,
the component, everything. And the role of model risk is to make sure that rank order which of the component has a huge impact on your in scope model.
mm,
And also, I mean, sometimes the out of scope component could down the road deteriorate and create bigger problem, but we should be aware of it. That's why the AI registry come into the play,
mhm,
is the communication. If you're not having communication, uh, things die in silence, and a bigger problem will happen, but you're not aware. It's going to be a big problem for the entire organization. So communication becomes a governance control,
yep. So
and
is this
and it
AI
becomes essential.
registry, this AI registry, is it similar to the model inventory, but and also owned by Model Risk Management?
No, it's outside the model risk management. It's at the AI risk, at the IT risk, the enterprise risk. It depends
Mhm.
which organ they coordinate, because we can't model risk. The task is bigger than model
Right,
risk,
right.
but that AI registry is basically communicating with different federated group.
Mm,
So with the compliance team, with model op risk, security, and so on, because what is a low risk for me could be a high risk for IT security. Okay,
mhm,
it could be high risk for compliance. And again, that communication is super important. That's why you need an ecosystem where it resides and communicate to each of the federated group about early warning, how the system is behaving as we move forward, and the
mm,
risk tolerance for different component. One mishap, it's big enough to break the whole system. For model
mm,
risk is like 2%,
mhm,
3%, I mean 5%, but one scenario that goes wrong could break the whole system. So again, that's the reason why you need an AI registry, and you need an AI communication between the different federated group to make sure that the system is operating as expected.
yeah.
Because
And
any
also,
changes, yeah,
one of the questions and I think I'm also seeing, organizational changes and announcements in my peer group, wherein people have been putting different hats now. New roles are coming up,
AI risk.
AI risk and also agentic AI. And I mean, like everything is becoming very so specific. So from a governance perspective, are you seeing different lines of reporting and also different functions who owns this? And kind of, I'm kind of, just practically thinking, is this like a hierarchical thing wherein we are now, re-orging, different groups, because now cyber risk and red teaming and IT risk and, technology risk, model risk, now who's going to be kind of managing and what are the lines of reporting? That's one part. But I've also seen organizations who are kind of scratching the surface, thinking of it more like a committee based, like, we're setting up AI councils wherein we bring peers to the table, and it's an output of the committee decision based on who owns what, and we do it project by project. Are you seeing any kind of trends, or do you
I
have your
see.
opinion on
Look,
this development?
I like you. I sit in round table. I talk to different groups. I've seen different organization having creating a centralized team. In my opinion, in my simple opinion, the goal is not centralizing ownership. The
Mm,
goal is to coordinate accountability. And again,
mm.
if you think about it, it's kind of like MacGyver putting things together
I was
and
actually wanting to
make.
bring Maguire because I know you have a Maguire history.
Yeah. So again, the goal is coordinated accountability where each governance function owns its own domain. I'm
Mm,
expert in my domain, while collectively they're going to provide assurances over the end-to-end decision system.
mhm,
I can't be IT risk. I can't be the data guru. I could be, but I'm not going to be an expert like them. So again, the goal is not, in my opinion, to centralize ownership. The goal is to make sure that we coordinate in the accountability. You're accountable for this, you're accountable, and then we're talking to each other. Where
mhm,
each of the governance function, I own model risk. It's my domain. But collectively, we're providing assurances to the business that the system is operating.
mm. Yeah, I know there are a couple more questions, and actually there are a lot more questions we have, Rafiq, but I know we are at also 105. I think we should end the
Yes.
session
I
soon.
mean, we need
Um,
multiple sessions.
Yeah, we need multiple sessions, but I would love to have you back again. This was a fascinating discussion, and I think we are still scratching the surface of, this evolving profession. And I think like leaders like you are kind of, setting the trail stones, if you will, for the trail to be set up for the trajectory on how this profession is going to evolve. But as a friend and as a collaborator and as someone who I love discussing concepts, this was a fascinating session. Thank you so much for making time for us and also sharing your immense knowledge and with the group and also with the community. Looking forward to working with you on more initiatives. I'll actually reach out to you. I actually thought of one as we were speaking. I would love to kind of connect and see how we can kind of formalize some of these things. That way we can provide more to both your teams and people who are learning to kind of get started, but also trying to see how we can set the standards, because ultimately we need standardization in this area. Even though the technologies are evolving at their own pace, we got to formalize it and see how we can kind of operationalize this. And with that, I think I'm so pleased to reconnect with you again, and we will continue the discussion online. And people who are listening in, we will share the slides and the video. I know there were many, many questions about like, where's the slides and where are the video kind of a thing. So I will definitely make sure that Rafiq's slides and the video will be shared to everyone. So Rafiq, I think we lost your audio. Please. So I can't hear you anymore. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I would like to hear their feedback because the gray area is so big. We want to reduce it. Any feedback, anything that you have, we learn from each other. This is basically our, this is where, we do benchmarking. We try to understand what others are doing, and we want to cluster in best practices.
Yeah.
So please share your opinion, please.
Absolutely. And also, I think this is one of the topics I'm bringing up for the roundtable again. We are trying to do these quarterly roundtables. We had more than 10 model risk managers, including a couple of people from Fifth Third and also Agus and others. We had this in-person meeting. So I'd love to kind of invite you to the next roundtable so we can actually get
Agus,
everybody in the
we
table.
learn a lot from Agus. We miss him.
Well, he's coming back next week. He's doing a
Yes.
1.5 hour workshop next week. We did a 1.5 workshop a couple of weeks ago on the development and the first line side of things. And this time we're going to do on the second line side of things next week. So I will send you the invite. So it's going to be Thursday from 10:30 to noon or 10 to 11:30. I will share the invite. So I'm actually a student of all of you, because you're all kind of, actually taking the fire on the front lines, and you're bringing all the lessons back to the community. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you,
Thanks
Sri.
again.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Yeah.